It's always the stress, and the stress happens to you. That's the worst more than anything else.
Well, the stressful part was like having to give up my new type of Japun cigarette.
Actually, that much preferred.
Everyone who was like,
You know, we all have really common complaints about the civil service. Everybody always thinks it's very bloated, and I'm sorry, when you look at the numbers, it's hard to kind of disagree with that. But, you know, why are we talking about this again? Is it because eventually the realization has come that one day we just can't pay for this?
well, I think you're right. When people say civil service is bloated, right,
Yeah.
they're alluding to the fact that there are a sizable crop of civil service for a relatively small country like Malaysia. But if you think about what people are really upset about, it's not just the sheer size, right? I think what people are upset about is expectations on efficiency and productivity and delivery level of service. But in our story, what I think we're concerned about is that the obligation to pay salaries and pensions is
Yeah.
mounting like never before. And we know that government revenue is coming under pressure. Oil money
Is not what it used to be.
No.
It's not what it used to be, and that's why. You see, here's the concern about it. If we eventually can't pay for the number of pensions that, you know, in the numbers of it, what happens to the country development-wise? I mean, it's like, where do you have to cut?
I think to be fair to the government, they are starting to realize that, look, there is an issue.
Yeah.
So we've seen that in the last few years, the government has put a freeze on creating new positions. So all the hiring is to replace staff that have left or retired. There are standing orders to stop or try to reduce costs within ministries, and that includes, you know, scaling down on events and the makan-makan, you know.
So not so much
travel,
elaborate
yeah.
tents and all this
Yeah,
kind of
you know,
stuff.
but I think where we have yet to see firm government policy is in managing the civil service in terms of outcomes and costs.
Okay.
So I think, you know, when we looked at all the numbers, we can see that emoluments, which comprises salaries, wages, and other allowances,
Doubled in 10 years.
it's doubled in 10 years to 77 billion.
Yeah.
Record high. You know, pensions has tripled over 10 years to 21 billion. These numbers will only go up if nothing is done to manage these numbers.
Yeah.
And I think if you contrast that with the rate at which our revenue is growing, that's pretty scary. I think revenue over the last 10 years has only grown a cumulative at 57%. Whereas if you remember, the salary increases and the pensions have increased in multiples.
Okay, here's the thing. I mean, whether it's controversial or not, I think it's okay for civil servants to be decently paid. You agree with that, right?
I agree.
Yeah, so they have to be decently paid. But we go back to what you said about the outcomes. And these number more than anything else kind of surprised me. 78%, almost 80% of all the numbers are concentrated on like frontline staff. And we're talking about things like education, home affairs, which includes like the cops.
Yeah, the
and
crucial
like
social
yeah, the
services,
healthcare
right.
and all that. And the thing is, we have like almost 141,000 on police. We have how many teachers? Like how many teachers in general?
We have almost 500,000 people
Yeah.
employed in education services.
But outcome, do you feel safer? Do I feel safer? Do we feel our children are more educated? Not that we have children, but you get what I mean.
Actually, I'll dial it back a little bit on why we looked at those numbers, because when people always talk about bloated and, you know, Malaysia has the highest ratio of civil servants in the world, then we realize that some countries don't account for police and army in their computation
numbers?
of civil servants. So we thought, okay, let's just be really, really fair to the Malaysian civil service. So we looked at the number of civil service. In the expenditure estimates, it's about 1.385 million. I guess if you add everybody up, the contract staff, the casual staff, it'll be about 1.6, right? And we had a hypothesis, right? Are most of these civil servants in administrative roles? Because I think that the enduring stereotype is that, you know, there's like loads of people sitting in Putrajaya kind of not really doing very much.
Chicken leg, yeah.
Exactly, right? So we wanted to see if that was actually true. So when we looked at the numbers and we carved out the portions of people who are employed in crucial public services, and I think we all agree that, you know, every country needs doctors and nurses, teachers,
cops,
you know,
border
the
control.
army, you know. So when we carved it out, then we realized that, my goodness, the bloat is really in these social services, you know. Honestly, you know, we know the problems, right? The harder part is the solutions. What do we do about this?
That's what I'm coming to, because I looked at the projecting cost of maintaining civil service. 2057, if Donald Trump doesn't blow
Don't
up
look
the
so
world
far,
by
just
then.
till the next 10 years, right?
Okay, it's like just 10 years, it's like 2027,
If
180.
emoluments double over the next 10 years again, we're looking at 100 over billion.
So what are we going to do? What is the solution? I mean, when doing all of this, is there a solution to it? Or do we grit our teeth and still complain?
Look, I think approach will vary, right? But I think everybody agrees that something needs to be done, and this has to be very holistic. Some of the civil servants I spoke to for this story, they said that it's not as if every part of the government is bloated. There are, in certain ministries, in every ministry, there are certain departments that are bloated and there are certain departments that are severely short-staffed. Let's never underestimate the difficulty in keeping government operations running around the clock, Then it goes back to allocation of resources, Is there someone sitting up there looking holistically to see where and how to deploy staff as and when needed? Because if you can do that in a targeted way, then we can save on contract staff and casual staff's bill,
How long before everything goes boom?
Are we comfortable spending half of our budget on paying civil service salaries and pensions? Or would we want to see more investment into new or upgraded infrastructure and better provision of social services? The government doesn't really have very many options. You either raise taxes, which will be very, very unpopular with the masses, right?
Yep.
I think lots of people have pointed out that even though GST is in place for 2 years now, personal income taxes have not come down. We don't have that flexibility. We can see that the development expenditure has been coming down as well. So something's got to give. We can't be spending too much money on operating expenditure every year.
For more on the stories, pick up a copy of The Edge Weekly at all good newsstands.